here right at the occasion that he's given the 10 Commandments, and he's telling them, whatever you do, do not make idols of silver and gold. And because he knows that we did our forefathers' will, and we've done everything else he said not to do, we would lose the privilege, the right to have access to his name. Now here, the thing in Hebrew, excuse me, the word name is actually Shem, and it also means fame, renown, reputation, the business which is your concerns. So when he says his name, he's not necessarily saying Yud He Vav He, Yahweh, Jehovah. He's also saying everything that he's about. Now I'm going to show you something very interesting in the 10 Commandments.
Go for it.
All through the valley of the Flathead here up in Montana, someone has put up a bunch of signs telling us the 10 Commandments. Well, that's real nice of them. The problem is they start with this one that says, you shall have no other gods in my face or against my face. That's verse 3. I want to read you verse 1.
Come on.
And verse 2 of chapter 20. It says, so Elohim spoke all these words, saying, now this word Elohim, that's the Hebrew phonetics of this word spelled Aleph Lamed He Yod Mem, Elohim. Mm-hmm. And it literally is translated. Now the interesting thing about Elohim is that El, or Elah, or Elohi, which would be my El, basically is singular. Elohim can be plural. And so a Christian is quick to jump on that and say, plural? Elohim is plural? Why, that's the Trinity. It speaks of the Trinity, as in, let us make man in our image, what he said back in Genesis. But the word Elohim can also mean the greatest, the highest, the best, the most. So you could say, well, this word Elohim is simply the highest El, the greatest El, the maximum. Again, once you start looking at words, you have to start debating doctrines. But I'm going to read you this next verse. And to the Jewish reader, or to one who regards the Hebrew, this verse 2 is actually the first of the 10 Commandments, which is on none of these 10 Commandment signs that are all around this valley. Mm-hmm. The first verse, which is the first, mind you, it's not a commandment. The word in Hebrew is debar, or debarim would be plural, and it means the matters or the things or the concerns which Yahweh has put before his people. This is what it says. I am Yud He Vav He, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You will have no other mighty ones, or Elohim, against my face.
All right, stop. Because something just came to me right there. Y'all listen to me for a minute. It seems to me that somebody would argue, well, this was way back then. What does this have to do with me? I wasn't in Egypt. I didn't cross the Jordan with Joshua's help and Elohim. But here's the thing. People today will take a 401k and put it up. They'll take up gold and silver and put it up for their children, so that they can have a. You always hear it. Well, America always says, "I want my kids to have a better life than me." Well, you know what? Hey, let me run something by you. He just got through reading what Elohim said to my ancestors. You know what? And guess what? Elohim has watched over his word so that we here today can hear and that we can understand and we can have this inheritance that is finer than the purest gold and better than any silver, better than any and all food you can put up, better than any and all weapons you can have or how you can shoot. This, my friend, that is being explained to you right now, that he is pronouncing, that is all over me. I don't know about you if you feel it, but I feel it all over me. Some people never feel him, but I feel him. And I'm telling you right now, the greatest inheritance you can ever get from any of your kinfolks is coming right now in this word. Go ahead, Eric. I had to say it.
Well, let me say one other thing about what you're saying there, Billy. These 10 Commandments, I've heard it said, are for the world. Stop right there. If you have a contract between you and your plumber, you write out a piece of paper that says, okay, I, so-and-so, live at this house at this address, and I'm going to hire the plumber by such and such a company name, and he's going to do a certain type of work, and I'm going to give him a certain type of money. Now, if you have an exchange of services between a particular two parties, that's a particularly exclusive contract, and it has no reference to any other person. So if your neighbor walks up and says, hey, you did some work for my neighbor, you should do my house too. It's like, I don't have a contract with you. I'll make a contract with you if you want to, but for the plumber to say, I don't have to work on your house, that's not part of the deal, unless you had written up, oh, yeah, it includes my neighbor's house too because he lives on my property and that's part of the deal. In other words, it has to be specific. So you go right here to the Ten Commandments, and it says, I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who? Who were brought out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. This is a very particular contract between Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the creator of the heavens and the earth, and his people of Israel, that he brought out of Egypt, the house of slavery and bondage. Now let me tell you something, which most people probably would never hear. This doesn't sound to me like it's a contract for the world. It's an exclusive contract between Yahweh and Israel.
Absolutely.
Now, anybody, any Christian, any Hindu, any Buddhist, any Islamic, who does not want to recognize this contract doesn't have to. But that means they are not this people group. Now, bear in mind, when the people of Israel came out of Egypt, out of them came a mixed multitude. It wasn't just the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It just wasn't the descendants of the 12 sons of Jacob. What came out was anybody who chose that they wanted to be under the sovereign dominion of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the creator of the heavens and the earth, and not under the earthly dominion of the Egyptians, otherwise known as Mitzrayim. Otherwise, if you translate that word, it basically means the ruling Caesar or Kaiser authority between a rock and a hard place, between two straits where they've kept their people in this squeezed bondage. And Yahweh says, I have taken you out, but I will be your Elohim, your mighty one, your overlord. You, then he goes on to say, you have no other mighty ones against my face. So I'm going to give you the exact Hebrew because it might come up later. Lo yayi lacha, do not make for yourselves, or allow there to be for yourself, Elohim achrim. That's the word Elohim, that's the gods again. Achrim, which means come later, or other, or ones that you haven't known, or newcomers of a different culture. Al-Panay. Now this word Al-Panay, literally they translate here against my face, but it can also be translated yoked to my face. So let me tell you this. According to this, what we call the second commandment, which is actually rendered as the first commandment typically, it says, I am the guy, this is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh speaking here. He says, I'm the one who pulled you out of Egypt. I rescued you by my own hand. I bought you. You are my people. Now I'm giving you the terms of relationship between me and you. Now, anybody that comes later, that's the word Achrim, who claims to be a deity, a god, an Elohim, that I have not made you familiar with at this time, who comes later on with a new set of rules, which has something to do with blending of doctrines from various other nations, people groups, and religions which you may encounter down the road. Strange ones that I did not specifically mention, but you then yoke them or regard them in conjunction with my face, my mouth, because the word mouth is the same as the word for face. He says, do not allow it or cause it or make it be so for yourselves. Now,
well, do me a favor before you go any further. Turn in the Bible that you have, just for the sake of argument of the New Testament, just a scripture, if you don't mind, because it hit me like a brick when you were saying that. Turn to chapter 14 of the book of Revelation, the unveiling of the Messiah, and read verse 12, please.
Galatians 14. I got to find it here.
Go ahead. You got time. Go ahead. Revelations chapter 14 and verse 12. Read it, please.
Wait a minute. There isn't any 14. Is this a trick?
Revelation chapter 14?
You said Galatians.
No, Revelation.
Okay.
No, not one of the epistles. We're going to get to the unveiling of Yeshua.
Okay, Revelation.
Just read that verse because it goes with Exodus, okay? I want to point out a thing to all the New Testament people that think the Torah and none of that matters. I want to point something out to them right now before you keep reading the commandments, okay? You go ahead and read, and I wish you were here, but you go ahead and read chapter 14, verse 12.
Verse 12?
Chapter 14, verse 12. Here is the patience of who?
Here is the patience. This says the set-apart ones.
Okay, it's great. Go ahead.
The Hebrew would be the word kadoshim. In English, it might be the holy ones or the saints. Here is the endurance, or you might say the perseverance, or the steadfast continuing of the saints, the ones who have been set apart unto Yahweh. Here are those guarding the commandments of Elohim and the belief or the testimony of Yeshua.
Well, how's that? When most folks, not all, but most folks say that ain't no need for that anymore. But obviously it says here, way over here in Revelation, that, here is the patience of the saints that keep the commandments of Yahweh and have the faith of Yeshua. Now, wait a minute. What are we doing over here in Exodus 20, Eric? That don't matter anymore to most of these so-called people of the day. I'm being sarcastic here, but go ahead.
Well, I'm going to go back to Revelation 14, verse 1.
Yeah, go ahead.
Then the Apostle John, the writer of the book of Revelation, says, "And I looked and I saw a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written upon their foreheads." Then you go up to verse 5, and it's talking about the 144,000 again. It says, "And in their mouth was found no falsehood, for they are blameless before the throne of Elohim." Then you look down to verse 7. I'm kind of going fast here because we could read all these verses all day, and it's wonderful, but I'm just trying to bring some points out to your listeners. It says, "There's an angel that was flying up in heaven, and he said with a loud voice," okay, I want to make sure it's the right voice here. "Fear Elohim and give esteem," that's weight or regard or honor to him, "because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and the fountains of water." And another messenger followed, saying, "Babel is fallen, the great city, because she made all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her whoring." Third messenger followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark upon his forehead or upon his hand, he shall drink of the wine of the wrath of Elohim, which is poured out and undiluted into the cup of his wrath, and he shall be tortured with fire and sulfur before the set-apart messengers and before the Lamb, and the smoke of their torture goes up forever and ever. They shall have no rest day or night, those worshiping the beast and his image, also if anyone receives the mark of his name." Now, I'm not trying to get into the mark of the beast here, but let me just say this.
Go ahead.
The word worship in Hebrew is obed. It's the root of the word Obadiah, the name of the book in the Old Testament of one of the prophets. The word obed is where we get obedience. And the word obedience, or obed, is the word for worship, but it's also the word for servant.
Yep.
It's also the same word for slave. The one you are enslaved to, the one you obey as a servant, is the one you worship. So we have a notion today in modern American culture that the one who has a kind affection in his heart for a particular doctrine regarding a deity of his preference is worship. But it says here, like Bob Dylan had in a song, you got to serve somebody, and the one you serve, obed, obedience, the one you serve is your worship.
Absolutely.
Babel is fallen. Well, people say, well, that's Babylon. That's a city. Well, the word Babel